और संवेदनशीलता के आधार पर हम अपने संबंधों को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध हैं।
And staying with the story, getting in breaking inputs. In fact, Prime Minister Modi has taken to X to share the message with regards to his meeting with President Xi. He's gone on to say, and let me quote, had a fruitful meeting with President Xi Jinping in Tianjin on the sidelines of the SCO summit. We reviewed the positive momentum in India-China relations since our last meeting in Kazan. We agreed on the importance of maintaining peace and tranquility in border areas and reaffirmed our commitment to cooperation based on mutual respect, mutual interest and mutual sensitivity. Those are the three very important tenets that Prime Minister also reiterated in his opening remarks as he met with the Chinese President during that big bilateral meeting. But remember, the sentiment has also been reciprocated by China as the Chinese President has in fact gone on to underscore the point that they are neighbors and they should not be rivals. And in fact, both the parties have now also spoken about forward movement as far as the border security issue at the LAC is concerned. Remember, there have already been 24 rounds of high-level engagement and much has happened, especially during that last meeting that took place during the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit on 18th and 19th of August. And so today's bilateral has also reviewed the progress that's been made in the overall ties between India and China. Let me quickly take all the latest ahead with our esteemed guests. I'm joined in by retired Lieutenant General Hari Mohan Iyer, who is a former Chief of Staff of the Northern Command in the Indian Army, Professor Shrikant Kondapalli, who is a Professor of Chinese Studies at JNU. Many thanks to you, gentlemen, for joining in. Lieutenant General Hari Mohan Iyer, I want to begin with you by taking your thoughts on the kind of forward movement today we have seen. Many had in fact spoken about how this was a bilateral meet that could perhaps bring a reset of ties. And on the other hand, many have said that this is meant to be a confidence building measure. It's meant to bring in that much needed thaw. What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Akansha. Thank you for having me on your show. Firstly, the words which the Prime Minister used, and he said two very, very specific things. One about disengagement and peace and tranquility along the line of control. So that are actually two things that have been happening for over 12 months. Since the time we have disengaged with the Chinese, the only issue which is now left is de-escalation of forces that have been inducted both on our and on their side, which needs a degree of negotiations between the two sides because there is a difference in perceptions in the manner in which this de-escalation has to happen. In my mind, I am very clear in my mind that we should get back to what we call as status quo ante. That is where we were prior to this whole crisis began. That we also move back to our permanent locations and they also move back to their respective permanent locations. However, there are certain issues because we have created so much of infrastructure on both sides,
True,
which requires to be maintained at both ends. So there will be some give and take which has to happen through negotiations. I am very positive on the fact that this border can be maintained, and two events, one in 2016 in Doklam and one in 2021 in Ladakh, have indicated that there is no military solution to this problem. This has to be negotiated across the table. And I am very certain that a border negotiation can be reached at with a little bit of give and take. Both sides have to be flexible in their approach, which we were moving towards in the 90s. Somehow, in the late 90s and beginning of this millennium, we lost sight of. I am sure this could be the start of another beginning. And over a period of time, we can change our perceptions as regards the line of actual control, because there is no great value territory that we are talking about. It is a question of just perceptions that needs to be cleared. And I am very sure that if people are positive towards these negotiations, this problem across the line of actual control can be taken care of.
Professor Shrikant, there was much hinging on this bilateral meeting in terms of the trust deficit, because analysts have highlighted that the trade deficit can only be bridged if the trust deficit can be bridged together. So do you think this bilateral has managed to do that, given that Prime Minister has in fact not minced his words when he sent out that message saying, and I quote him verbatim, that the two leaders have deemed it necessary to expand common ground on bilateral, regional and global issues and challenges like terrorism and fair trade in multilateral platforms. What do you make of that message being sent out? Because one, of course, refers to United States and the other to Pakistan.
In terms of the mutual trust, so two things. One is in terms of the mutual trust and how this can be built up. So the Prime Minister has spelled out a few details, as you mentioned. But mutual trust, the last time it was mentioned was by President Ronald Reagan for the Soviet Union, that we trust but verify. And Dr. Manmohan Singh once said in the parliament about the same in regard to China, stating that we trust the Chinese, but we will verify on the borders and in their actions. So that is the Prime Minister reiterating that, we need to look at the reality and how the actions pan out from China in regard to the bilateral relations. The second, of course, is on many issues, the trust factor is tested. For example, you mentioned about terrorism. The Raksha Mantri's visit to China recently, 2 months ago, for the SEO Defense Ministerial meeting in June, and also Dr. Jaishankar's visit to China for the SEO Foreign Ministerial meeting. In both of these, India did not sign to the draft which mentioned about terrorism and in relation to the BLA, Baluch Liberation Army, and the Majid Brigade, instead of the Resistance Front, which took responsibility for the April 22nd Pahalgam attacks. So there is no mention about the Pahalgam attacks in the draft resolution. So both the Raksha Mantri and the Foreign Minister did not subscribe to it. And so there is some tension here in the final outcome. So the final SEO joint statement very likely to have an Indian jarring note in relation to the Belt and Road Initiative, because that violates the sovereignty of India in CPEC projects. Number two, in terms of terrorism, even though they mention about countering all forms of terrorism, they don't counter the April 22nd incident in India, in Pahalgam, and the subsequent India-Pakistan conflict. So there is also the problem of trust that needs to be bridged in the bilateral relations.
Glad that you highlighted that, and I want to quickly bring in Lieutenant General Hari Mohan Iyer also on that note. What's your assessment of this contradiction now that India is taking a step forward with China, but if there is going to be no condemnation of the Pahalgam terror attack, in fact, there's often placing the victim and the aggressor on the same platform, as we've seen happen in the past as well, because like Professor was also highlighting, why must Pahalgam be equated with Baloch insurgency? This when Pahalgam was orchestrated by foreign terrorists. In fact, we've had Chinese analysts on our discussions ask what's the evidence. So what is your assessment of a grouping like SEO not coming up with a condemnation against the Pahalgam terror attack if it doesn't find a mention in the joint communique?
Firstly, there has been a lot of shifting of stances over the last 2 months, especially after the way the Americans have decided to change stance, particularly after, I think, 17th of June, the world order is looking different. I guess the Prime Minister's initiative to go to a SEO summit and be part of a bilateral also stems from that particular happening. So there will be certain change in the world order. As I always mention, there are no permanent friends or permanent foes in today's world order. They are all business world. Especially when you are the fourth largest economic and military power in the world. You can't be treated in the manner in which we were treated by the world order earlier. So they are still trying to hyphenate us with Pakistan, which in today's scenario does not work. Whether it was China or the USA, both tried the same thing with us. I personally feel, and I had said it on your show, that when we were in Op Sindoor, we were looking at both fronts. There was certain amount of collusivity which was very, very visible in the manner in which the Chinese assisted Pakistan. So that will stay in the background whenever we are negotiating with China.
No, I agree, because it's not just about defense sale and purchase by China, by Pakistan. It's also about crucial intelligence sharing that's taking place between the two countries.
And not only that, they kept us fixated on the northern borders, possibly also forced us not to go beyond a certain limit of Op Sindoor, because we were still looking at both borders at that time. So that kind of a problem will continue, and it has to be de-escalated. That's why I said what the Prime Minister mentioned today is very clear. Disengagement, he hopes that disengagement brings continued peace and tranquility along the line of actual control. He is hinting at that we should go back to our old status. And I guess this bilateral may be the start
Perhaps.
of that particular activity.
Right.
But
Professor, we've seen that start. All right, sir, please finish your point.
Yeah,
and I would like to-
like Mr. Srikanth said, that there has to be a mutual trust. It has always been one step forward and two step back with the Chinese. When 2014, when the Prime Minister first had President Xi here in India, the same day tumor happened. Again, when the Prime Minister went to China, the same day Depsang happened. So it is a question of how China plays its cards here onwards, and how does it treat India, as it has to treat us at the table as an equal partner.
Right. Professor,
I'm sure
I want to quickly bring you in, since I'm also running short of time. So when, as Lieutenant General Iyer was also highlighting, there has to be mutual trust, and in fact Prime Minister himself referred to those three tenets that you also referred to: mutual trust, mutual respect and mutual sensitivity. So what is the conundrum here? Can trade ensure that mutual trust comes between India and China and is restored finally? Because it's certainly not going to just depend on trade. Yes, we've seen heartwarming announcements of the Mansarovar Yatra also resuming, as have the direct flights to mainland, which of course were halted after COVID. So a host of people-to-people ties, the connect is being restored. And what is your assessment now of the larger conundrum here, if we are to sort of resume trade and go full throttle with it?
We have seen trade relations improve resulting in improvement in relations between countries. For example, China, Japan, China, United States. So trade is one element, but this is not a crucial element. China and Japan keep fighting on the Senkaku Islands. United States and China keep fighting on the magnets and rare earth metals and so on. In addition to Taiwan Strait, South China Sea, a host of other issues. So trade in itself doesn't really contribute to stability in bilateral relations. Trade is good. Some people are trading. That's good. But that in itself doesn't really result in stability. I think the greater conundrum is if the PLA takes another action, like the Doklam, like the Galwan incidents. If they take an action like this, then we will go into the hurdle again.
Right.
We lost 5 years in the bilateral relations from June 2020 till October last year. So probably that will also become a reality in future as well. Maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years, because after 1962, 1976 was the time when we exchanged the ambassadors between the two countries. So PLA would be one conundrum. Second is nationalism in China.
I'm actually
Third is China's ambitions. I think.
Professor, I'm afraid I'll have to cut you there. My apologies, because I'm running short of time, but thank you for sharing those very precious insights with us. We're slipping into a quick break. As we return with the latest, stay tuned to CNN News 18.
This is News 18 Network. India. India's largest news network.
To you, but I think we're getting the first picture. These are the live shots. The Prime Minister in the center of the table, on the opposite side, Xi Jinping of China. You can see the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister's right, the interpreters to his left. I don't know if we have the audio. If we have the audio, we should play up the audio, but I'm not. All right, we don't have the audio right now. The audio, I think, will come through subsequently. But you can see the Prime Minister there speaking to President Xi Jinping of China. You can see the warm handshake, the Prime Minister wearing a beige waistcoat and a kurta, and President Xi Jinping in his black suit and grey tie. Rahul Shivshankar, we are showing these pictures full frame. I can see the National Security Advisor. I can see the Foreign Secretary also sitting next to the Prime Minister. We don't have the audio on this feed, but these are the first pictures of the bilateral that is underway. Rahul.
Yes, it's been confirmed to me that a gentleman called Sheng Shanji, I just hope I'm pronouncing that name right, is also part of that conversation. He's the chairman of the National Development and Reform Commission and has been in office since March 2023, and is governor as well as deputy party secretary of Zhejiang and the party secretary of the Central Committee. So he's a very senior officer. And obviously somebody who's closely associated with the economic side of things in China, and is supposed to be quite close to President Xi Jinping, who is the other person who is eliciting some amount of interest in that particular meeting. And those pictures are now being broadcast also on our screens here, so quite clearly that was a loop that was put out perhaps in advance. Maybe the Indian side said, hey, how did this go out before we could put out? So maybe there was some scheduling issue there, but we got a glimpse of that meeting, and I did tell you that President Xi was visible there looking across from the Prime Minister. But yes, this is quite clearly a meeting that is going to be focused on two definitive